All right, here we go. Good afternoon and welcome to the Hoosier Huddle podcast. I'm Sammy Jacobs. Along with me is T.J. Inman and Matt Weaver of Peaks.com. And when Matt's on, that means we're talking about Indiana football recruiting. Matt, how are you? Busy weekend, busy December really with the coaching changes and all that stuff. But how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you guys?
Doing great.
Yeah, very excited to have you on. Certainly, a lot of things have changed since we were last able to talk to you on the podcast. A busy time for you at Peaks.com. You've put up a lot of great work covering Indiana's hiring of Kurt Cignetti. I guess we'll take just from hiring of Cignetti and the construction of his staff. What have been kind of your big takeaways from the past a couple of weeks here before we get into the recruiting side of it. I think it's in general just an exciting time for IU fans to feel optimistic about the institution taking football seriously.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm interested to see his contract details. We're still waiting for that, but this is a guy that I mean, I might have mentioned it the same. I know I mentioned to other people even months ago, weeks ago, when we thought about if they made a change, what kind of guy could they target? And Cignetti was a guy that I thought of. Willie Fritz, I know Sammy liked him, but they're kind of the same boat. A little bit older coaches, but incredible backgrounds with winning and rebuilding programs at all different levels. And so, this is I think Indiana made a terrific hire, and I think the staff he's put together is a strong one. And obviously right now they're trying to put together a roster because it's a little bit depleted, but they've gotten some commits here in the last couple of days, and I think they'll obviously get quite a bit more before now and spring ball.
Matt, Kurt Cignetti came in during his press conference and said stars don't matter. Is that something that you agree with? Is it kind of a mix of both? I know in my, philosophy on recruiting, I'm not a gazillion-dollar head coach of a Power Five team, but obviously somebody is rating them and looking at them and rating them highly. But also another thing is how they fit with the program, how you could develop them, and all that stuff. And just to take 4 stars for the heck of taking 4 stars hasn't really worked out for Indiana in the past. And we've seen it the last 3 years. Indiana had really good recruiting classes, and this should have been the peak of Tom Allen, the Tom Allen era, but it never materialized. How important are those recruiting rankings?
Well, I mean, I think when he said that, obviously stars matter to an extent. I mean, if you look at the top teams in college football, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Michigans, you can go on and on and on. They get the best players in the country according to the rankings. I've always said, to me, I don't know. First of all, football recruiting evaluation is really difficult. Basketball, all these guys play in AAU ball, and they go up like you see a top player from California and a top player from New York or wherever they may be. You see top 10 guys go against each other. You don't really see that in football. And if you do, it's like 7-on-7. It's not real football. So, to me, it's really hard to judge those guys. And so, to me, that's where coaches and their evaluations come into play. And I don't think there's a big difference between a guy who maybe is just a borderline 4-star and a guy who's a 3-star. I think you could throw a bunch of those guys in a hat and pick them out, and there's not a lot of difference. The rankings might be different, but I don't think and I think that's kind of what he's talking about. I mean, obviously a 5-star guy is a 5-star guy. Now, they don't all always pan out, but a lot of those guys obviously hit because that's where, the Alabamas and those schools that's the players they're getting for the most part. So to me, I think he's talking about how you have all these guys. I mean, there's just probably hundreds, if not thousands of players in that 3-star, low 4-star bucket. And to him, I don't think it's going to matter. I mean, and even a low 3-star guy for them may be just as valuable. They've taken 2 in the last, in today. The quarterback from Miami, Alberto Mendoza, is like a 82 ranking, which is a low 3-star, and the D lineman who, I mean, I watched his tape a little bit today, and he plays over in Pennsylvania. he's right around there too. So, these are guys they believe in. These are guys they feel like they can develop, and their track record speaks for itself. So, for the time being, I'm going to trust their judgment because they know a heck of a lot more about it than I do.
Yeah, you mentioned the commitments that they've gotten here today. Guys that visited this past weekend that were either transfer portal prospects or, in the case of Landino and Mendoza, guys that were committed to James Madison, to this coaching staff, that have now flipped their commitment to Indiana. So I think a list of at least publicly 9 visits that were on campus this past weekend, including a JMU commit that is a 4-star, depending on the recruiting service you look at, but a speedster, Jaja Boyd, and then a couple of guys that are already committed, and running backs Kobe Martin and Justice Savage, that look like they'll be sticking with their commitment to Indiana, and that the staff wanted to keep them. Kind of a two-way street there for these guys that have offers. Does the new staff offer them, and does that player still want to go with this staff? So, of that group of players, do you think there are any surprises to come out of that? I know Justice Ellison, running back from Wake Forest, committed. He was not a publicly known visitor, but he did visit as well. What do you think about Justice Ellison? And then do you think there's any more coming from this weekend's visits?
Justice Ellison has been he kind of reminds me of, and when I say reminds me, maybe not the same kind of running style, but Christian Turner, who IU brought in this year and had some good games for him, also from Wake Forest. But a guy he's been a productive back, he's been a lead back. 2022 was his best year, had over 700 yards, had a pretty good season this year. So I think, this is, anymore you don't have a bell cow back. Most places, unless you've got some stud. But just anymore, you split carries between 2-3 guys. So I think he's a good get. If Josh Henderson decides to stick around, and so far he hasn't made, I guess no news is good news there, then that's a pretty good start at running back. And then you mentioned the 2 young guys that they're bringing in, Kobe Martin and Justice Savage, who committed to the previous staff and are the new staff reoffered, and they've solidified their commitment. Charlie Becker was also here, the wide receiver, who's a guy I really like from Tennessee. And then Jaja Boyd, who I'll be kind of surprised if he doesn't commit to Indiana, but we'll see. I think he's been him and his mom have been pretty active on social media, liking a lot of IU stuff. So he may just be waiting for the right time to make his announcement. But there were other guys on campus, and it's kind of an off the record deal. And I think a lot of them were portal guys. There might have been another high school guy or two, but I think you could still. I think there could be some more commits. And sometimes you bring in portal guys, you offer them, and you bring them in because you want to get a close look at them and get to know them, and then you may figure out once you get them on campus they don't fit your program. So I'm not sure exactly how many other guys came. I wouldn't be shocked if it was almost double what I reported, which was 8. So I think there could be some more commits. It'll be interesting. I'm interested to see what happens at quarterback. It looks like Curtis Rourke from Ohio is kind of the lead guy as far as a portal addition. So, I'm kind of starting over this staff, so I'm trying to feel them out, and they're trying to feel me out. But I think usually I can give you a number, like I think this many guys will commit by December 20th. I'm honestly not sure. I don't think this roster will be set until probably May, but I think the majority of it will be set by spring ball. That's my guess, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, one follow-up off of that information. You mentioned Curtis Rourke, which I'll talk about him in a minute, because I've been doing quite a bit of research on who potentially could be, IU's quarterback for the 2024 season. But 2 questions on the guys that were in here. One is more of a statement, I guess. Am I kind of crazy for thinking that Justice Savage is capable of contributing as a freshman. I really, really like what I've seen of him and kind of the measurables he has and the competition level and area where he plays high school football in Georgia. So that's one. And then I've seen Jaja Boyd mentioned as a guy that the staff continues to recruit as a two-way player, kind of a wide receiver and secondary guy. Do you think that's still the plan for him at IU, playing two ways in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I think Justin Savage has a chance. I would say he could be a guy, and I don't know what he's done as far as special teams in high school, but he looks like a guy you could maybe use. You could put him on kick return. And I've watched some of his highlights, and obviously you mentioned his program. I believe the quarterback there is that Nolan, who's going to Ohio State, if I'm not mistaken, at his high school.
You're right.
It's a loaded program, and I think they've had other running backs. That's one reason why I don't think he's gotten. He's kind of emerged late because he was surrounded by so many good players. It was kind of easy to get lost in the shuffle. But I think, not to, sidestep the question, I think anybody who comes in freshman, now there's going to be some, I don't think a lot of linemen hopefully are going to be playing right away because they need a year. But I think skill guys, all these skill guys are going to have a chance. This is a clean slate. Everybody's got a clean slate with this staff. And I think Cignetti's going to be a guy, he's going to play whoever. He's not going to, there's going to be guys that he'll probably look at and think, I need this guy to be good for me. But I think everybody's got a chance. And I think Savage brings something, to this roster that, like you mentioned, he's got some explosives. You watch some of his highlights and, when he looks like he shot out of a cannon when he runs the ball in the backfield. So, I think he's got a good shot to play right. And I'm sorry, TJ, what was your second question?
Jaja Boyd, and it's been bandied about as a two-way player. Is that something that has continued to be the plan as far as for him, or are they kind of focused more on?
In my visitor preview, I mentioned that because in one of the stories they talked about when he decommitted that the plan was for him to play. He's listed as a safety, I think. He's really an athlete. He's a slot receiver. Safety. He's 5'10", 170. I wonder if he'd be more of a corner, but maybe he gets bigger, more like a nickel guy. But I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe since you're moving up to the Big Ten, you rethink that just because obviously, they were playing good competition, but you're playing bigger, stronger, faster guys, and that's a lot on a guy, whose physique is not, super huge. But he's a DB and then they occasionally put him over on offense. They run some plays for him where he's in the slot or they do some stuff where they try to get him the ball and jet sweeps or whatever it is. It'll be interesting. To me, you bring him in, he looks like a terrific athlete. He's got speed, explosiveness. You bring him in, and you figure it out. He could make a case that he's, needed on both sides of the ball. I might argue he's needed a little bit more on offense. But I think you can make a case that he's also, there's a need on defense. Even, I was looking at the DB. There are quite a few DBs coming back, especially at safety, but there's going to be a lot of turnover at that position, assuming those, guys, are gone after this year, upcoming season. So maybe you want to start replenishing, the secondary so you don't have to take a bunch in the following class. But, if they're able to get him, which I think they will, I don't want to say it's going to happen, but everything points to him, eventually coming into Indiana, it'd be a heck of a good get.
Matt, I wanted. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Sammy. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask the question that's probably on a lot of people's minds with recruiting, and you see all these James Madison flips and guys who don't really have those Power 5 offers. Is that a concern with this staff, or is it they're getting guys who they know, they trust, and they could turn into Power 5 players?
Well, it's kind of a loaded question. Obviously you want to try to get guys that are getting offers from the same schools you're playing against. And to me, that's not so much the Michigans, Ohio States, the Penn States. That'd be great if you could get those guys, but it's more like the Illinois, the Minnesotas. We've got this, the Purdue's, who I consider Indiana's peers in the Big Ten and who they really need to compete with and beat. But this staff has shown that they can take these guys and develop them. And like I said, this is where, obviously offers are different than rankings, but this is where, they've done their evaluation. somebody close to the program, when I asked him about Daniel, I don't know if in Duque, I think that I'm pronouncing that, the guy who just committed, the word was freak. He's a freak athlete. So, maybe he's a little bit raw. Maybe his skill set's not there, but you take that piece of clay who's got, high level athleticism, and you coach them up. And that's what these guys do. They're really good at coaching guys up and maximizing their talent. So, I mean, it's early on. I'm not going to say this is how they're going to recruit 3 years from now. And I'm not saying they're just taking guys to take guys, but I think they're more willing to take a guy that they feel really comfortable with, who maybe on paper is not as talented as a kid that maybe they could go chase, but they know that this kid, from a culture standpoint, from a character standpoint, from how they want to do things, he fits exactly what they want to do. And, that's what they're going to go after. Real quick, I will say a guy from Wisconsin site came over, Trey Wedig, the old lineman, is visiting Indiana this weekend. 6'7", 318, O tackle from Wisconsin is going to be at IU this weekend. So he just posted that on our board. Evan Flood. Evan does a great job covering Wisconsin. So thanks to Evan for and I wondered if that might be the case because obviously Bostad would have a relationship. So just wanted to throw that out there that he's going to make an official visit.
Yeah,
Awesome.
That would be terrific, and that was kind of going to be the next question, and it's not one that you can answer because I don't know if we know that there's not answers quite yet, but definitely a lot of help is needed and reinforcements are needed on the lines of scrimmage with portal defections and then up front on the defensive line with guys graduating. It's two areas of the team that really need reinforcements in a big way and guys that can play immediately. So portal upgrades. I like the incoming freshman offensive lineman. I think that Bob Bostad has got a really good group coming in that he has kind of resecured their commitments, but they're not going to be able to help you probably year one. So those portal guys, and Wedig is going to be somebody that right away when he entered the portal, it was, hey, that would make a lot of sense for him, for Bostad to grab him. So hopefully that's the case. But turning to quarterback, you mentioned Nathan Rourke from Ohio, Curtis Rourke, a guy that was 2022 MAC Player of the Year, tore his ACL before the MAC title game and missed that in the bowl game for them, and then came back, for the season opener and got hurt, unrelated injury against San Diego State this year. Missed 2 games and then played and was, in my opinion, kind of clearly a bit limited by the injury and by a lack of quality weapons this past season for the Ohio Bobcats. I don't think he had much to work with last year, but still, on the surface, if they're able to land Curtis Rourke, that would seem like a real win for Indiana. I think that the immediate assumption was, they'll go get Jordan McLeod from James Madison. There's never really been any real traction there. It doesn't seem like he's even an option for them. Whether that's his choice or the staff's choice, we don't know. But Rourke is a guy that is visiting this coming weekend, if I'm correct about that. I think they play a bowl game on the 16th, but I believe he has a visit at some point coming up soon with IU. So you think Indiana is seriously pursuing Rourke and he's interested? And what are your thoughts on what kind of fit that would be with a staff that does really well with quarterbacks?
Yeah, to me, he's kind of the perfect, portal quarterback when you've got some young guys already on the roster that look like they have some promise. And let's remember, Taven Jackson's still a young guy, and I know he had some obviously not great moments, but and I'm not going by rankings, but he's a talented player and highly thought of for a reason. And I think it's far too early to say Taven Jackson can't be the quarterback in Indiana at some point. I'm not saying he will be, but I'm not going to judge him off a couple of games early in the season. and write him off. But I think Curtis Rourke or a guy like that, it doesn't have to be, but like that 1 year guy who can literally bridge the gap from what you lost to what you think you have down the road. For the 25 season. Obviously, he played well at Ohio. He was well coached over there. Frank Solich for years did a great job at Ohio. I think he just turned it over like a year or two ago to one of his. I think it's Tim Albin took over. I could be mistaken on that, but I think that's who took over. But they've had some success. They upset Iowa State this year. I don't know if he was the quarterback in that game, but he's had, like you said, 2022 MAC Player of the Year, which is good football. I mean, a lot of those guys can play in the Big Ten, and to me, this is the perfect kind of guy. I haven't watched a ton of him. I would assume he's a smart quarterback. Maybe this is a lazy comparison. I would assume he's probably kind of similar to a Peyton Ramsey. Smart, tough kid. Just knows how to make plays, has those intangibles. I don't know physically how he compares, but I think it'd be a great pickup if they're able to get him. I saw where it was down to his top. He was kind of down. I don't want to say down, but it looked like he was focused on Indiana and Wake Forest. Wake Forest obviously got, I think it was Hank Bakemeyer or Backmeyer, however you say his name. You would assume, and he's a 6-year guy. And they're both 6-year guys. I don't think if I'm a 6-year player, I'm going to go to a school where they just took a 6-year quarterback. So I would think Indiana's in the driver's seat. It's interesting. I think he is playing in the bowl game Saturday. Is that correct? I think that's right.
That it appears to be the case. Yes. They have not removed him from their roster. It does seem like he's going to play in their bowl game. And I was connecting the dots with IU and Wake Forest were his finalists. Wake Forest gets Hank Bachmeier. Therefore, okay, and maybe I shouldn't use the word finalist. Maybe it was just a school he's serious about, and Wake Forest appears to be off the table. So Indiana, if the staff wants him, which I don't know why they wouldn't, based on what I've seen, and I've watched 3 full games and then highlights of Curtis Rourke from both 2022 and 2023. In comparison to Peyton Ramsey, he is not as I would say he's not quite as quick as Peyton Ramsey was, which I still don't think people gave Ramsey enough credit for how athletic he was, and how quick he could be when he got into the open field, but definitely has escapability, is able to maneuver around in the pocket, throws a really good deep ball, very accurate with the deep ball, particularly when he has receivers that he trusts, which he did in 2022. Several instances of him stretching the field with 40 to 50-yard passes that were really accurate, both down the sideline and on posts, over the middle of the field. So really good there, good decision maker, not a lot of turnovers. I think for his career, I don't remember the exact amount, but I think he had over 700 dropbacks, over like his past 700 dropbacks. He was, in the top 10% in terms of interception rate. So taking care of the football, making good decisions, accurate on the deep ball, pretty good on intermediate and short stuff. His career completion percentage was, well above 60%, and he was above 65% these past 2 years. So I think, he's a guy that with his legs, which I think is important for Indiana football, and really for college just in general now, I think it's important that your quarterback can at least pick up first downs when a play breaks down, can get outside the pocket, extend the play, and, pick up a first down with his legs when he needs to on a third down. And, Rourke is a guy that can do that. He's 6'5", north of 230 pounds. He's a big guy. And I do think that based on what we have seen this coaching staff with Tino Sinceri, who everybody raves about his work with quarterbacks, and then offensive coordinator Mike Shanahan, I think that given the tools that Rourke has, if IU could put weapons around him and an offensive line that, could block competently, I think you'd have the makings of a really exciting offense and one that could be Indiana's best in quite a while. So that's just a bit of a info dump on Rourke that I've found. I'm sure if IU gets serious with him, and it looks like he's going to be the guy, I'm sure you'll get a lot more info than that on your own. But looking to the defensive side of the ball,
I want to ask one more thing on offense for Matt. And I also want to say shout out to Andy Graham, who's listening over across the pond. So good evening, Andy, and thanks for checking in. But Matt, let's go back to the transfer portal and the exiting players from IU. The entire starting offensive line entered the portal. You saw Khalil Benson go to Colorado. Matt Bedford visited Colorado and Auburn, I believe. Is there an effort to get guys like Carter Smith and Zach Carpenter back, and Matt Bedford back? Or are they going to look at the offensive line in the transfer portal is a high premium? Where are they going at that position?
Well, I think I've heard Smith is a guy that they're definitely would like to try to get back. I haven't heard a ton on Carpenter. Doesn't mean that they're not trying. I just haven't heard a ton on him. My guess is, I here lately I heard that Bedford and Benson had kind of been talking about leaving for a while, like even before the coaching change. So that kind of tells me that maybe they were just looking to move on. That doesn't mean maybe Bedford comes back. Obviously Benson's gone. Maybe he does, but if I was going to lay money on it, I would probably say Bedford probably moves on as well. But it takes two. He's made two visits. Colorado took I think they basically took an entire offensive line over there this weekend. So I don't even know if they'd have another spot for him. I guess it's possible. I don't know what's going on with him in Auburn, but obviously visiting and little nugget. Darren Hiller is on the staff at Auburn as an analyst or one of those quality, whatever the titles are, consultant, whatever it is. So he's down there. Obviously to me, Smith would be the guy that I want back the most. I mean, and listen, I get a lot of people. I saw a tweet today. Somebody said they should back the Brinks truck up and pay Donovan McCauley. I just don't agree. And I would be willing to pay Don McCauley, but it doesn't make sense to pay a guy who plays receiver if you can't block for, somebody throwing the ball to him. And I think McCauley's a terrific player, and I think he's got next level ability. But to me, Carter Smith was always the guy I felt like was the most important guy in the portal, because starting left tackles in the Big Ten are hard to find, and this guy could be your starting left tackle for the next 2 to 3 years. And was he perfect? No, but for a redshirt freshman, he was pretty darn good, I thought. He had some bad moments, but he showed a lot of promise, and this is a guy that I know that the previous staff felt strongly about as far as having NFL potential. So to me, he was the guy that was, to me, is the number one guy. And then if you can get back some of these other guys, for these veterans, Zach Carpenter, I know Josh Ells didn't play great, but he's been in the system for a couple of years. If you can get those guys back, great. But to me, Carter Smith is the key guy. If you can't get him, nobody's irreplaceable, but obviously that's a big hole. I think you can replace Don McCauley's production. Maybe not with one guy, and you may not have the guy who can go up and make some of the plays he can, but you can replace that production. I think it's going to be harder. It's not impossible, but harder to replace a Carter Smith than a Donovan McCauley, in my opinion, when it comes to their production on the field. Because I think you can do it with multiple guys at receiver. You can't really do that at O-line. You got to find a guy who can play left tackle and play it at a level that Carter Smith looked like he was going to be headed towards.
Yeah, offensive line is a big concern in the portal. Both bringing guys back and then go and get new guys too, because you need players who are ready to play at the Power 5 level. TJ, we wanted to switch over to the defense in our defensive portal needs article that's on Hoosier Huddle. It really could have been a one-word article and everything. IU needs everything. You saw Jordan Greer came back from the portal today. That helps depth in the secondary. But you need defensive linemen, linebackers, safeties, secondary. And now, the secondary was a big concern even before some of these guys hit the portal. So, Matt, what starting up front on the defensive line, what are the needs up at defensive line with Patrick Lucas and Ladarius Cox heading to the transfer portal?
Well, obviously you'd like to get some guys on the interior. Now, if you look at D line, right now I think Philip Bleedy's going to be back. Now we'll see. I mean, you have to remember one thing that could happen is guys can come back, go through spring ball, and decide after being coached by this staff this isn't the place for them. But if you can bring back a Philip Bleedy, a Marcus Burris, Robbie Harrison's a young guy they brought in last year. You need more than that. Obviously, that's only 3 guys, but at least it gives you some kind of a foundation or a base to start from. But you got to, I think the guy from Iowa, Ontario Thompson, is intriguing. He didn't play a bunch this year. He was an All-American in JUCO ball in 22. Comes to Iowa, blocked a couple kicks, didn't really play much on their defense, hardly at all. But he was expected to be in the rotation for it. And obviously at Iowa, besides punting, the one thing they can do is play defense. So, I think he's an intriguing guy. It sounds like he's down to IU, Kansas, and I think can't remember the third school. Maybe TJ can remember. I just tweeted it out too, and I can't remember who the third school was.
Oklahoma Oregon State, I think, wasn't it?
Or yeah, something like that. But if you could get a guy like that obviously would be great. But yeah, they need depth on the interior. And listen, it wouldn't shock me. There's been quite a few guys from James Madison who've gone in the portal, and they've not reported any offers, which is kind of interesting. At least I haven't seen hardly any. I wouldn't be shocked if some of these guys end up at Indiana. I don't know that to be a fact, but I wouldn't be shocked if that happens. And then this may be one of those things where they're trying to kind of keep it low key because obviously they were at JMU and they could end up at IU. But I if you can bring some of those guys who know your defense, they don't have to be stars. They have to give you. You need some guys to give you some snaps, to give you some depth, and some of those guys. And they've got some guys who are pretty good players in their conference. So, but yeah, depth at D line. I mean, linebacker. To me, my most concerning position right now is linebacker on defense because I look at the linebacker position, and there's literally nobody who's played at least meaningful minutes, meaningful snaps. So that to me. I'm not saying secondary and D line aren't concerns, but there are at least guys who've got game action at both those positions, and you could put together a serviceable D line and secondary. I'm not saying it'd be great, but it'd be at least serviceable because you have some guys. Linebacker, it's a giant hole right now. They really need to get some linebackers, in my opinion.
Yeah, you lose guys like Aaron Casey, Jacob Magnum Ferrara. We'll see what kind of defense JMU run or Cignetti runs. You also lose Miles Jackson's in the portal. Anthony Miller, not Anthony Miller. He's the tight
Anthony
end.
Jones.
Anthony Jones, one of those common last names that everybody has. Anthony Jones is in the portal, and things like that. I thought, Joshua Rudolph could step up too. He was a fast back. He played well down the stretch. But yeah, replacing Aaron Casey and Jacob Magnum Farrar is going to be a tough hill to climb for IU. Any more questions, TJ?
Yeah, I think on the linebacker side, getting Quentin Clark to stay committed is an important one because as of right now, he looks like a guy that could actually not just see significant snaps, but find himself in a starting role based on the rest of what's at linebacker. So I expect a lot to be done in the portal at linebacker as well. Really just on the whole offensive side of or both sides of the ball, your tight end is kind of the last one that I've wanted to kind of ask about with the transfer from UConn, who's rated as one of the top tight ends in the portal, more of a receiving tight end, which is something that IU doesn't really currently have unless Sam West kind of develops quite a bit over the offseason, which is very possible. Very talented guy, but they've got more kind of your bigger blocking tight ends. They've got a lot of bodies there, but I'm not sure how many of them are difference makers. The UConn transfer, and last name's Jolly or Jolie, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but any thoughts on that and the wide receiver position, which, without Donovan McCauley, without Jalen Lucas, without Jacquez Smith, which, he wasn't playing anyway, but certainly thinner than it was. So you've got some needs at wide receiver and tight end. Do you think that they will continue to try and target that? Any ideas on kind of who they may be pursuing there and their chances with the UConn tight end?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the UConn tight end is really intriguing. I mean, he put up pretty good numbers there, and obviously they were, didn't have a great season, but he looked like an athlete. I think your description is great, is spot on. More of a receiving, which to me is what they need. I mean, I don't know what Bradley Archer's going to do. He can come back, I believe. James Bomb is more of a blocking tight end. We haven't really seen a lot from the other guys. I'm really excited about Brody Cosin. I think keeping him was one of the biggest coups of this recruiting cycle, because even if there wasn't a coaching change, I thought there was a real good chance that he could get scooped up by somebody else. He's a good looking prospect. At receiver, and obviously another guy that you mentioned, some guys, Cam Camper's another guy who's in the portal. So you're talking about, for the last couple of years, your leading receivers are not there. The guy from Wake Forest, Kayshawn Williams, I'm pretty sure he visited this past weekend with Ellison. I'm pretty sure. I was told that there was a running back and a receiver from Wake Forest. So, pretty simple deduction. I know there was another receiver from Wake Forest that had gone in the portal, but I think he committed before the weekend, or on like Friday or Saturday. I can't remember his name, but I'm pretty sure, like Henry something, I think. But he committed somewhere else, and I don't even know if Indiana offered him. They did offer Kayshawn Williams, so I think he might have been on campus. I don't know what's next. I mean, a lot of these guys, they post offers, but they're not really talking much. It's kind of this whole point. It's kind of secretive, and I wonder if some of it is because there's so many guys out there that they're trying to find a spot and get it. You know what I mean, and not really publicize it too much. I don't know, but it's kind of been real hush hush. But I think he was on campus, and I think he's more of a slot guy. But you know what? They could use somebody like that. Anderson Kobe did not have a great year. He showed some flashes the year before. Obviously, E.J. Williams, looks like a guy who's got a chance to be pretty good. I thought Omar Cooper was – it's a shame he got hurt, because I felt like he was really starting to come on. I think it was right around that Penn State game. He was starting to come on, and I think it was that game where he got banged up and didn't play the rest of the year. I could be wrong, but, we'll
No,
see.
he got hurt against Wisconsin. Somebody rolled up on his ankle.
Okay, so that was the week after Penn State. So the Penn State game where he had that nice touchdown catch. But anyways, he was starting to show something. So there's some pieces to work with, but you got to have depth. Right now, I have him with 6 scholarship receivers, and 2 of them are guys in Derek Bowler, who redshirted, and Charlie Becker, who have not played a snap of college football. So you basically, and Cameron Perry's not played very much. So you got 3 guys who've seen game action, significant game action. So obviously, I wouldn't be shocked if they try to add 2 guys out of the portal and then maybe another guy or 2 out of the high school ranks. To try to get this up to around 9 or 10, that to me, that's where you want to. I remember Kevin Wilson always would tell me, and this is different. His offense is different. He wanted 11 receivers, because the way he ran his offense, obviously they were up tempo and they ran a lot of deep routes. He wanted to be able to rotate guys, because when a guy runs a deep route, even if you don't throw him the ball, you got to sub him out, because he's going to be a little winded. So, they're at 6. I think they need to probably get at least 3 to 4 more. It'd be my guess. And, tight end, they got a lot of bodies, but like TJ said, nobody's really, emerged. I think they've got some young talent, but bringing in an older guy does make a lot of sense, or at least a veteran, maybe not older, but a veteran who's played college football and been productive.
Mm-hmm.
All
yeah,
right.
I keep hoping Elijah Surratt from James Madison, and maybe he will, but, connecting the dots, had such a great year last year for them as just a sophomore. And if he did choose to enter the portal, he'd be highly coveted, I'm sure. But that would be a guy that you'd look at as, if he entered, you get excited about the opportunity for IU to pursue him. But this is all just great stuff. I'll let Sammy take it and won't bug you anymore. But I thoroughly appreciate you answering questions for us, and all the great work you've been putting out on Peegs throughout this very busy time. Certainly not the off season.
Yeah, we'll
I
go.
was
We'll
going to
go.
say thanks, TJ. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Matt does great work on Peaks. He has great questions at press conferences, which is going to be
You
it's going to be
better.
a thing that you better bring your A game to the press conferences this year, which is good. No repeat questions, no reading off the box score, stuff like that. So bring your A game. But it's what signing day is December 20th, 9 days away. The portal closes the first weekend of January. It's going to be a busy time. So thanks, Matt, for jumping on and talking IU football with us again. So you can keep coming back to HoosierHuddle.com. We'll have this posted on our on podcasts, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you subscribe to it, as well. We'll post on the site. So, Matt, before we get you out of there, we're going to have an exciting rest of the week on the recruiting trail.
I think so. I mean, and I think you have a week and a half until the signing period. I remember the signing period goes actually 3 days. It'll be the 20th through the 22nd, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think most guys sign on Wednesday. You have a few guys who like to build up the drama and drag it out, but it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think there's around, assuming nobody else leaves, I think there's around 20 spots left. I want to say I have my roster at about, and there could be, like, does Matt Bama get a scholarship again? Does Matt Holt, I mean, I don't know. I
James
would assume,
Bomba.
but
I
sorry,
think
did I say
Matt
Matt Bama?
Bomba's
That's his dad. That's his dad.
he's at
I know Matt.
eligibility.
Yeah, I know Matt personally. He was a straight coach when I was the manager. So I'm sorry, James. But shout out to Matt. He's a good dude. But yeah, does James Bobby get a scholarship? Does Matt Hole keep the scholarship? But I have around 20 to 21 spots, and obviously that's a really moving target and a fluid number. So there's some work to do. I don't think they'll fill. I'd be a little bit surprised. I shouldn't say. I'd be surprised if they fill all 20. By next Wednesday, a week from Wednesday. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's they only have 5, 6, 7 spots going, because they still have the February signing period, and you still have another portal opening. Like sometime in May? I think the first couple of weeks of May, you'll have another opening with the portal. So I could see them even trying to save a few spots because maybe some guys come open then that they really like.
Awesome stuff from Matt. If you haven't, check his stuff out over at peaks.com. Also, come to HoosierHuddle.com. We're doing our staff profiles. We'll look at each of the staff members that are coming to IU with Kirk Cignetti as well. And then, of course, we have our Bowl Mania pool. If you haven't, the link is up on our Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. It's $10 to join. Winner gets 70% of the pot, 30% goes to Hoosiers for Good, Hoosiers Connect. So join it. It's fun. You might win a little money. Also, Hoosiers Connect will give some swag away too, including hat, t-shirts, stickers, all that stuff. So follow us on Twitter at Hoosier_Huddle. TJ, thank you again. And Matt, as always, thank you.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
All right, that does it for today's podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in live. And